So I just finished reading The House of Sky and Breath last night, and I want to talk about it. My first thoughts was, oop, so this is the second book of the Crescent City trilogy, and I have to say, with the ACOTAR series, I still can't believe the same author wrote these two books. I was so obsessed with ACOTAR, and it was really hard for me to I was grieving that I'd finished this series. I was so sad. And when I first picked up Crescent City, I was like, wait, is this even right? Is this her other trilogy everyone's talking about? Like, there's iPhones in here. It was written from a completely different perspective. At the end of A House of Earth and Blood, I was like, okay, this is so good. It's just kind of like a really slow burn. And with this book, I realized this is just written as if it was like a movie. Like the ACOTAR series and the House of Sky and Breath series is just so different. Like the ACOTAR series gives me everything I want in an amazing book. Like I hadn't read a real book in a couple years, and it launched me back into reading. Now I'm obsessed with reading again. Whereas if I had started with this series, I don't think I would have even finished the first book, because she puts crack cocaine in this series pages. I think it's because it's just written, it draws you in, and all you can think about is the story. When I was reading the ACOTAR series, that's all I could think about. I literally had to download the audiobooks so I could listen to it in my car. I was so when I read the pages, I just disappeared into another dimension and was in that story. And when I started reading The House of Earth and Blood, it was just completely different. I almost had to stop every 30 pages and kind of just also because it was pretty intense, but I also had to just stop and reflect on what I read, because it was kind of hard to comprehend. It wasn't painting the same story in my mind that the ACOTAR books had, literally put me in their world. But I realized that this series is basically, to me, I read it as if it was a movie script. It read like I was watching a movie. They honestly should just make it into a movie word for word, because it's ready for that. And also it would be such a good movie because of the animal shifters and Bryce Quinlan. Now that I got to end of this book though, it all makes sense. I've heard everyone talking about how the Sarah J Maas universe is a universe, and I did not understand that. And now I totally do. Okay, let's start with the beginning of House of Sky and Breath. The prologue, which explained the second book with Sophie and Emile and everything, I could not read it. My ADHD was just I don't understand at all. Kind of when I first started A House of Blood and Earth. So I just skipped that part and just got into the first chapter, because I needed to just get into it. And at first, like I said, it played out like a movie. Bryce is super hot, Hunt is super hot, they're in love, they're going to this fancy ballet show. It was giving all the vibes. And then the book just continued and continued and continued, of 500 pages of just kind of being not really too super exciting. Of course it was, but it was a slow burn until I got to the very last chapter, and then my jaw was on the floor. Or it took more the last 10 pages, and then it was oh my god, when she teleported. Okay, let's back up just a little bit. So god, the way Sarah J Maas writes is just so amazing, because I said, I always felt I was 2 steps behind. My brain was just trying to comprehend what was happening and all these little pieces. And then when I got to the last page, and I guess the last chapter, when she realized that the Asteri were just drinking their energy, and that's why when they went to the bone quarter, she was so upset, because I didn't understand that. I was kind of well, if you die, we don't know what happens to people when they die. She's they get shot out into starlight, and they eat and the bone quarter eats their most of their life. I was just so confused. I was why is she so upset by that? They died, they're gone. But now it all made sense when she got to that part. They're just feeding on them, and they eat the children, like very scary, very similar to the Illuminati. I was like, Sarah J Maas, is this all actually true? When she like got through, okay, when the Hind ended up being a rebel, that was chef's kiss. That was fucking amazing. That like made the book so much better for me. But when she teleported and she was going to hell, and then it was like a man with leather wings and a beautiful face, she's like a demon, I was like, oh, that sounds like the Illyrian people. And I was like holding my breath. I was like, he's blindfolding her, and then he takes her in, and then she's like, oh, they're all dressed as like the way people do like in the olden days. She starts speaking the old tongue, and then Rhysand comes out and Emry, and I was like, Emryn, and I was like, oh my god, this is so amazing. Like, my soul left my body. I was like, this is incredible. And everything made sense. I finally understood this book, because this book, I feel like for everyone, we're kind of like, okay, is this just like a sex book? Like, everyone called it the novella. It didn't really like need to be in the series, as like a lot of people were saying, and I thought it was just like a fluffer book, and I was like, I don't really know why we need Nesta's story. It was a good read. But now I realize this book, Nesta, it was just a conduit. All that sex talk was just to trick us to read it, because this book literally is what connected I'm so excited. It connected this series into this series. There's so much foreshadowing, like the priestesses, I don't know, and then they're playing the harp, and like that mean priest lady, I need to reread this book now, I can't remember her name, but I swear it's like they are somehow involved in this universe, or they had come for this universe. Like, who is Juniper? Was she like related to like these librarians? Okay, mind blown. Why did she have the entire like secret library thing hidden? Like, how did she get that? Why did she have that? No one knew about it. She had like all the ruins of it. She had like defected as a witch, blah 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 blah. Oh my god. And the queen, Hypoxia, had been telling Ren like, oh, I don't like my my like coven, because they just want to be with the Asteri, and that's wrong, and my mom raised me like with the dead tutors from before the Asteri came. And Juniper literally defected from being a witch because she's trying to like, okay, so in this book we learn that 15,000 or 1,500 years before, probably 1,500 because Juniper can't be that old, the Asteri had come to this planet, Midgard, and it came here because they had been here, but they got kicked out. But these people had the energy they needed to like feast on, like it was best for them. And then the beings that lived in Midgard, it wasn't really, they could only eat the kids, I guess, or something. They weren't getting that much energy from them. So they had siphoned creatures from the ACOTAR universe and sent them there, and then, oh my god, okay, I just realized something. So they had like convinced all the people from the other planets and stuff to come to Midgard and to like conquer there. And those part of those people were the elven people from the ACOTAR series. And then, okay, so when she landed, it was just like light. When she landed in the ACOTAR universe, everything started to make sense. Like, who is Hunt's father? He's definitely from maybe the Illyrian race, somewhere, the Day Court. Like, oh my god, my brain is just blown. And the Autumn King, he always reminded me so much of Bryce's dad. I was like, they're definitely cousins. Or Lucian? How's Lucian involved in this? Like, it's just, I'm just so curious now. Like, she did such a good job merging this universe together. Like, if you are bored in your life, or someone is being mean to you, stressed out, in a bad breakup, you should read the whole Sarah J Maas series. It'll like be very consuming, but it is so good. Go to part two of talking about my review of The House of Sky and Breath. I just finished it last night. And this part, I'm talking about how it merges into the ACOTAR series universe. Okay, so like I said, Hunt's daddy is definitely from the ACOTAR world, because as we know from the end of The House of Sky and Breath, because I definitely didn't really think about this. I just thought it was like maybe another dimension, another time, and I guess in a way it is another dimension of the ACOTAR series, but I really just thought it was just a completely different series. Like, she's like, oh, another version of fairies. They live in like a modern city, blah, 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 blah. And this time they have animal shifters. But no, Midgard, that is where they live in the House of Sky and Breath in that series. It was like this other planet that the Asteri, the like high lords of Midgard, had come to because they'd been going from planet to planet, like sucking, like leeches sucking the life out of their people, which is when they make the drop, that's what they do, like suck their energy. And it all made sense because like the Autumn King and even like Hypoxia had said, like, it's so weird, just generation after generation we keep having less magic. It's like our line is dwindling, it's just disappearing, because the Asteri had just been drinking it from them. And I remember thinking that was weird, and they're saying that because I was like, that's weird, because in the ACOTAR series it never seemed like they had less power with like each generation that came, because like Rhysand was the most powerful king like to ever live, they said. So a couple theories. I think Emryn, which is she's one of Rhysand's like inner circle people that always said like she doesn't even remember where she came from, she's older than time itself, she can just take any form of body, she needs to drink blood, she can't eat food, blah 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 blah. And maybe, okay, there was like a lost Asteri in Midgard, and maybe like she's one of them, or some, she's not evil though, so I'm a little confused if that theory is correct, because the Asteri is like obviously evil and they have to drink the Fae light, like the Fae's powers, they drink it and like consume it. So I was a little bit confused because she just drank blood and she didn't seem to be super evil. She was like down just to chill and be with like Rhysand and just cruise. But okay, so people obviously from the ACOTAR planet, they had left 1500 years ago and they went to go try and like join the Asteri to conquer the planet Midgard. And people moved there, kind of like how they like conquered America, and like, okay, basically Midgard is America. They were like killing off the Native Americans, and they invited like, I guess like a bunch of Europeans came and tried to overthrow it. But then let's say that then Europe had like closed off their gates, so all the white people that came to America, they couldn't go back to Europe, which is basically what happened. So all the elven people and the other shape-shifting things that come from other planets, like the animal shifters, were also elven people too, but they convinced them that they were different, so they pitted them against each other. And the Asteri's just up there acting like the Illuminati, playing high and mighty while they're just fighting with each other. The story is just quite literally so crazy. I cannot wait to read the third book of the House of Sky and Breath. Yeah, the third book of that series. Because I'll be honest, when I first started reading The House of Sky and Breath, I was just a little bit, until like the 500 page, I was a little bit disappointed, I'm not gonna lie. Or especially when I first started reading it and there's a Sophie character. And that's why I just skipped the prologue, because I was like, I'm just too confused. I barely know about like the Hunt and Bryce of it all. Like, I can't start a whole new character. And I was like, I really hope they don't throw Bryce's story out and just skip to the Sophie girl. But they didn't, and it turned out Sophie was just to explain like what like the power that would take over the Asteri would be, and that's basically Bryce and Hunt together. She is like his conduit to use his power into, which is kind of like makes me think of Daddy, what's his name? There was Cassian and Azriel. Okay, so they talk about how Azriel has these shadows and he has these powers and he has siphons, and they don't really know what that means or like what he does. And it makes sense because like Azriel basically is like all of Hunt's powers, because Hunt has to use his electricity through a conduit, which is Bryce, for it to work and to like be this almighty power, but Azriel can just do it on his own. He has siphons. So Illyrian man is the one that like basically kicked out the Asteri from the planet they are in ACOTAR, because they talked about it when they do the Illyrian like the Illyrian races, when the little kid warriors like graduate, they have to go and they have to fight to their death and go on top of the mountain and push that like magic stone, right? Well, apparently that an Illyrian man is the one that like kicked them out when he was like climbing with his guts hanging. He was fighting off like this evil, like powerful forces that were trying to imprison them, right? So he's the one that like sent them away and closed off the Akatar planet to them, which is why they can't get back in, and the Styria is trying so hard to get back in. And that's why they had like lured Bryce Quinlan, I hope you guys are following, they had lured Bryce Quinlan into the Styria Palace and basically like tricked her to be a rebel, which is when they like sent the cat, the Prince of Hell, to go into her house and talk to her. They were all just trying to trick her to be a rebel so they could get her into the Styria's palace so they could use her and Hunt's power together as a conduit to break back into the Akatar planet, because that's where they had the most power from which they could feed on in order for them to keep living forever as leeches. They would eventually, I guess, drain the Midgar planet and just it would just die off on its own, and they would have to go find another planet. So they really wanted to go back into the Akatar world where they had the most like real raw power for them. But Miss Bryce Quinlan, and because the Hind was on their side, really if the Hind hadn't defected, I don't know if it would have like, if she hadn't been a rebel, I don't know if they would have been able to do what they did, which was like Hunt and Miss Bryce Quinlan were able to go through the portal on their own, because the Styria wanted to use her to do that for him to go through, but instead she was able to just get through just on her own and close the gate, and boom, she did. She ended up with Daddy Azriel. Azriel must, do you think Azriel's Hunt's dad, or is Hunt's dad the guy that like originally kicked them out of, wait, I don't, okay, you know how there's the Illyrian warrior, and that's why they have the Illyrian races when the little warriors graduate? I don't think he's Hunt's dad though, because that was like 1500 years ago. And how old is Hunt? Isn't he like only 500 years old? Because it seems like, okay, because Bryce's dad is like, isn't he 500 years old? And then her brother Ren, or however you say his name, is only like 75 years old. And it is kind of weird how Miss Quinlan's like 21, and then also in the book, and Hunt's like 500 years old, and then Rhysand's like 500 years old. But his girlfriend, Feyre, she's 21, and then Quillen's 21, and it's like it's taking age gaps to a whole nother level. Okay, my makeup and hair did not turn out so good because I was so excited about this book, but I need to go back in and read this one because I know there's like a million little connections between these two worlds, and that holy library that they have in the House of Wind, Rhysand's like palace, there's got to be like something. Oh my god, and that magical creature that like scared the shit out of them that was down there, what was he? Who was he? Where did he come from? And then are these two universes happening at the same time? That's also what I'm curious about, because Bryce, when she came to them, she knew like this old language that she learned from Jezebel's books or whatever, but they hadn't spoken it in 1500 years in her planet. But then on Akatar world, they also hadn't spoken it for 1500 years. So maybe it's the same timeline. Who's Hunt's daddy? And who is Lucien? Lucien has to be something in this. And then is Autumn King Lucien's dad?